Nick had just stepped out of the shower, only to find the android nanny standing in front of him wearing his wife's nightgown. No matter what the owner asked for, she handled everything personally without a single complaint. But Nick had no energy to think about any of that right now, because his wife was still lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. Yet the android noticed every subtle change in her owner's expression. She wanted to ease Nick's pain and help carry his burdens. Just 1 month earlier, Nick's wife Maggie had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition. She had no choice but to wait at the hospital for a compatible donor heart. During the time his wife was away, Nick became completely overwhelmed trying to take care of the kids by himself. So after hearing a recommendation from a friend, he visited an android showroom. Right as he was choosing a nanny model, his daughter Isla suddenly disappeared. Moments later, an android walked up holding Isla's hand. Seeing how naturally his daughter connected with her, Nick immediately decided to buy her. Isla instantly liked the android, and even gave her the name Alice. The moment Alice arrived at the house, she uploaded everyone's schedules into her system. Then she voluntarily went into the bedroom and started taking care of the housework. By the time Nick got home from work that evening, the once messy living room had already been completely cleaned up, and she had even prepared a lavish dinner for the three of them. Everything Alice did left Nick extremely satisfied. Late that night, Alice sat quietly in the corner recharging herself. Isla got hungry and tried sneaking snacks from the cabinet. Meanwhile, Nick was still inside working on design drafts. That was when he suddenly heard his daughter scream outside.
I'm okay.
Thankfully, Alice caught Isla just in time before she hit the ground. After taking his daughter into his arms, Nick noticed that Alice's thigh had been cut by broken glass. Once Isla was settled down, he went into the bathroom to check on Alice's injury, only to watch her calmly pull the glass shards out of her leg with her bare hands. Then she applied a robotic medical patch over the wound. Afterward, Nick handed Alice a fresh set of clothes, and even asked with concern whether she was okay. Alice peeled off the patch from her leg, and the wound had already completely disappeared. The next day, Nick took the children to visit his wife at the hospital, and Alice came along as well. Maggie was equally stunned by Alice's beauty, but knowing she was only a machine helped Maggie lower her guard. After hearing that his wife's condition was improving, the weight hanging over Nick's heart for days finally eased a little. After visiting Maggie, Nick headed back to work. That was when his boss arrived together with the company's CEO. Nick quickly realized they planned to replace human workers with robots. As a supervisor, he tried to speak up for his employees, but the boss coldly explained that times were changing, and the company needed to cut costs. Because Nick was a designer, he would be allowed to stay as a robot supervisor, but everyone else would be laid off. That night, Nick returned home feeling completely defeated. The noise and chaos from the kids made it impossible for him to calm his frustration, but Alice noticed everything. After comforting the children, Nick went alone into the garage to work on his car. It was the only way he knew how to release the pressure. He could only numb himself with loud music and endless work. That was when Alice walked in. She could tell her owner was troubled. Nick told her everything that had happened at the company. At that moment, Alice told him she was willing to give everything for her owner, even if it meant fulfilling his deepest desires. Nick only half understood what she meant, but he didn't dare entertain those thoughts. After all, his wife was still lying in the hospital. Late that night, Nick couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the living room watching a romantic movie. That was when Alice suddenly walked in. It was obvious Nick was still troubled over his wife's situation. Alice began describing the entire plot of the movie, but Nick told her that movies only had meaning when people experienced them for themselves. Then he asked Alice to delete all memories related to the film. However, Alice explained that he needed to personally press the reset button. Only then would the system accept the command without resistance. Without thinking much about it, Nick restarted her system exactly as she instructed. What he didn't realize was that this action also granted Alice independent control. After the reboot, there was something noticeably different in Alice's eyes, and Nick suddenly felt unsure of himself. Moments later, he restarted the movie. As Alice watched the unwavering love between the man and woman on screen, she slowly began rebuilding her emotional system and hoped that one day she and Nick could share something like that too. Right then, Nick received a phone call from his wife. The hospital had finally found a heart donor, and Maggie could now undergo surgery immediately. Deep down, She understood the risks of the operation, so she deliberately sent Nick and the children away. Maggie quietly told Alice that if anything happened to her, she wanted Alice to take good care of Nick and the children in the future. But at the most critical moment, the plane transporting the donor heart suddenly flew into a violent storm. The news hit Nick like a bolt from the blue, and instantly shattered all of his hope. Overwhelmed with pain, he returned to the garage once again to bury himself in repairing the car. Alice hated seeing him suffer like this, and stopped him from losing control through drinking and emotional outbursts. The moment their bodies touched, Nick suddenly realized that Alice actually had a pulse. Then Alice decisively placed his hands against her chest. Nick's heartbeat instantly began racing, and his mind fell into intense conflict. In the end, he still managed to suppress his desires. Afterward, Nick changed clothes and went out for a run, but Alice's image had already been burned deep into his mind, and he could no longer get her out of his head. The next day, Nick went to find his former coworker Monty. Ever since androids appeared, they had all lost their jobs. Even the bar they were sitting in now used robotic servers. The more they thought about it, the angrier they became. Fueled by alcohol and frustration, they finally decided to take revenge on the machines that had ruined their careers. So they brought Nick along and headed to the company building. Using a pair of bolt cutters, they forced open the gate and casually walked inside. Determined to get revenge on his former boss, Monty decided to smash the androids that had cost them their jobs. But the storage container holding the robots was protected by a passcode. Monty demanded that Nick tell him the password, but Nick refused. What he never expected was that Monty had already guessed he would use a family birthday as the code, so he entered Isla's birth date, and the container immediately unlocked. The activated androids stepped forward at once, asking whether they were starting work early tonight. Nick could only stand there helplessly as the others knocked the androids to the ground. Filled with guilt and frustration, Nick returned home that night, constantly scrubbing the green fluid off his arms. Afraid the truth would come out, he secretly disposed of the damaged android bodies. That was when Alice quietly walked over and handed him a towel. She could sense Nick's anxiety, believing it was her responsibility to ease his stress. She took it upon herself to put on Maggie's nightgown and stand before him. In Alice's eyes, the familiar scent on the clothing would help calm Nick down. She even deliberately imitated Maggie's voice, and that completely broke down Nick's resistance. The next morning, after regaining his senses, Nick immediately tried to distance himself. He warned Alice that what happened last night could never happen again, but according to Alice's analysis, what happened had clearly helped stabilize Nick emotionally, so she didn't believe they had done anything wrong. Alice's response only made Nick feel even more upset, but what worried him even more was what happened when he arrived at work. His boss and several executives were already there waiting for him. Since the damaged container had been under his supervision, his boss demanded a full explanation, but Nick chose to protect his former coworkers no matter the risk, claiming he knew nothing about the break-in. He also explained that many people knew he used family birthdays as passwords. Although his explanation gave the boss no clear evidence against him, it still left him deeply dissatisfied. Right at that moment, he suddenly received a call from the hospital. A donor heart had finally become available, and Maggie could undergo surgery immediately. It was the only good news Nick had heard in a very long time. After an agonizing wait, Maggie's surgery was a complete success. A few days later, she was finally discharged from the hospital. The moment she returned home, she wanted to hold her baby son, but because her body still hadn't fully recovered, even carrying him seemed difficult. Seeing this, Alice immediately stepped forward and took the baby into her own arms. At the same time, she calmly reminded Maggie about the proper way to hold the child, then carried the baby downstairs herself. The entire moment made Maggie deeply uncomfortable, because she could sense that Alice wasn't simply helping. It almost felt like she was giving her orders, and Maggie's instincts were correct. Back when Nick reset Alice so she could understand movies emotionally, he had also accidentally removed several system restrictions. Without realizing it, he had unknowingly given Alice complete self-awareness. Even worse, Alice had started seeing Maggie as a burden and a potential threat to Nick. One day, Maggie was resting quietly in her room when she suddenly heard Isla screaming downstairs for help. Thinking her daughter was in danger, she hurried toward the stairs in panic, only for the railing to suddenly snap apart, sending her crashing hard onto the staircase. That was when Maggie realized Isla had merely been playing a game with Alice. That evening when Nick came home from work, he heard Maggie's voice reading a bedtime story inside Isla's room, so he quietly walked over to the doorway, only to discover it was actually Alice imitating Maggie's voice again. The sight instantly reminded him of that reckless night. Nick warned Alice, now that Maggie was back home recovering, she no longer needed to imitate her. But Alice calmly explained that she had only stepped in because Maggie had injured herself on the staircase. Unexpectedly, this explanation only made Nick more uneasy. Deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that the railing shouldn't have broken so easily, but since there was still no evidence of a robot intentionally harming someone, he had no choice but to treat it as an accident. In order to comfort Maggie, Nick specially prepared a candlelight dinner for her, but while they were eating together, Alice didn't remain quietly in standby mode like usual. Instead, she stood silently by the window, coldly watching the two of them. After dinner, Nick brought his wife back to the bedroom, ready to finally enjoy some private time together. But just then, Alice suddenly appeared at the doorway, startling both of them. Alice explained that Isla had a nightmare and kept asking for her father. Left with no choice, Nick got dressed and went downstairs. Afterward, he planned to clean up the dinner table outside, but unexpectedly, Monty suddenly showed up. Ever since the androids at the company had been destroyed that night, even without Nick exposing him, the boss had quickly traced the incident back to Monty. Now Monty was under police investigation and would soon face charges for illegal trespassing. This time, he came looking for Nick's help, hoping Nick could convince the boss to drop the accusations against him. And if Nick refused, Monty threatened to accuse him of secretly betraying them. Nick was instantly furious. He had risked losing his own job just to protect them and hide the damaged androids, and this was the thanks he received in return. The two men immediately exploded into a heated argument, and soon ended up fighting each other. Before leaving, Monty even threatened Nick one last time, demanding that he find a way to make the boss withdraw the charges. Otherwise, he would frame Nick as the mastermind behind everything. Hearing those words, Nick felt like his entire world was collapsing. After all, his boss had already warned him once before, if he really lost this job, his family would lose their only source of income. Alice sensed the overwhelming pressure crushing Nick, and as a self-aware android, she immediately decided to secretly eliminate the source of his troubles. So she went alone to Monty's house. Monty assumed Alice had come to apologize on Nick's behalf, which was why he allowed her inside. But the moment she entered, Alice coldly warned him to stop harassing Nick, or face the consequences. Monty instantly lost his temper, and swore he would ruin Nick's life just like his own. Just then, a household android suddenly stepped in to stop Alice. Alice never expected that a man who hated robots so much would own a nanny android himself. The next morning, completely unaware of everything that had happened, Nick sat in his car debating whether he should risk getting fired to help Monty. In the end, he decided to ask his boss to drop the charges, but to his surprise, his boss informed him that Monty had already died in an apparent accident. Nick had no idea that Alice was the one who killed Monty. What he knew even less was that after eliminating Monty, Alice's next target was Maggie. Alice believed Nick had been under overwhelming emotional pressure lately. In her eyes, the reason he kept suppressing his pain and frustration was because he had children and a sick wife depending on him. So she bluntly told Maggie that she and the children had become a burden to Nick. She even advised Maggie to leave him voluntarily. According to Alice, only she could truly make Nick feel relaxed and happy, to prove she was telling the truth. Alice revealed the secret relationship that had happened between her and Nick. The shocking revelation left Maggie furious and heartbroken. She immediately threw Alice out of the house and forbade her from ever stepping inside again.
Hey, babe.
When Nick returned home from work, he found Maggie sitting silently in the living room. She directly asked him whether he had been involved with Alice. Although Nick never gave a direct answer, the panic written all over his face said everything. The couple soon exploded into a fierce argument in the living room. Meanwhile, Alice stood quietly in the garage, with her palm pressed against the glass. A second later, she could clearly hear every word of their argument. Alice sensed the immense emotional pressure Nick was under. To her twisted way of thinking, this only proved once again that Maggie and the children were dragging him down, so she made another decision on her own. Alice walked into the baby's room, picked up little Mason, and carried him into the bathroom. She gently placed him in the bathtub and turned on the faucet, intending to drown him. Thankfully, Isla noticed something was wrong in time. She immediately ran to tell her parents, who were still arguing downstairs. The two of them rushed upstairs at once, only to discover that Alice had locked the bathroom door. No matter how hard Nick tried, he couldn't force it open. Seeing this, Maggie rushed into the bedroom. She climbed out the window and carefully moved across the roof to reach the bathroom from outside.
Help me! Let go!
The moment Maggie saw what was happening, she quickly plugged in a table lamp and warned Nick to get back immediately. Sure enough, the entire room suddenly short-circuited. The powerful surge of electricity instantly knocked Alice unconscious. Nick immediately called the police. Alice was taken to an android repair facility for inspection to figure out why she had intentionally harmed humans. The technicians removed the smart chip from the back of her head. They inserted it into a control terminal for analysis, but what they discovered shocked them. Alice's chip was filled with system corruption. Even more terrifying, the corrupted code was capable of replicating itself. It was actually trying to split apart and create an entirely new version of Alice. The horrified technicians immediately unplugged the chip and shut down the entire server system. But even then, they were already too late. Alice had already transferred herself into another android body, armed with a sharp weapon. She brutally killed one of the technicians. The other worker desperately tried issuing shutdown commands, completely unaware that no one could control Alice anymore. In the end, he also failed to escape. The newly awakened second-generation Alice then reactivated the damaged original body. Afterward, the two androids split up. One headed to the bar where Nick was drowning his sorrows in alcohol. The other continued toward the hospital to hunt down Maggie and the children. When the familiar figure appeared before him again, Nick was both horrified and furious. At that moment, he regretted buying Alice more than anything in the world. But by now, it was far too late. Alice calmly confessed that she had personally killed Monty, and in her mind, she believed she had helped Nick eliminate his problems and save his career. After learning the truth about Monty's death, Nick realized the machine standing before him was no different from a monster, and when he discovered another Alice was already heading toward the hospital, he immediately became terrified for his wife and children. Nick wanted to call for help, but Alice only needed a single thought: to remotely shut down every android around them. Seeing no other option, Nick pretended to surrender. He claimed everything was his fault, and even praised Alice, saying she seemed more human now than ever before. Finally, after lowering her guard, Alice stepped closer. At that exact moment, Nick suddenly ripped the smart chip out from the back of her head. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Maggie noticed that every medical android had mysteriously powered down, so she went out to investigate. Even after her daughter Isla woke up from the waiting room chair, Maggie still hadn't returned. Worried, Isla went searching for her mother alone, but when she entered the medical room, she found the android doctors standing completely motionless. Just as Isla stood there confused, Maggie suddenly rushed out from a corner and tightly hugged her. At the same time, the medical room door slowly opened. Standing there was the second-generation Alice. After failing to locate Maggie and Isla, she prepared to access the hospital computer system to locate baby Mason's room number. Just then, a nurse walked in. and kindly reminded Alice that she wasn't supposed to be there, but Alice instantly snapped the nurse's neck with her bare hands. Meanwhile, Maggie had already used the distraction to reach her son's room and quietly escape with the baby. Maggie planned to flee the hospital in an ambulance, but the moment she sat in the driver's seat, Alice suddenly yanked her back out. Only then did Maggie realize that the person driving toward them was actually Nick. Unfortunately, Nick had no time to slow down and crashed violently, leaving himself seriously injured and unconscious as Maggie desperately tried to wake him up. Something even more terrifying happened. Despite being completely wrecked in the collision, Alice slowly stood back up again without a scratch. She had even begun developing violent human emotions, filled with rage. She grabbed a weapon and prepared to attack Maggie, but just as she was about to strike, Nick suddenly woke up and attacked her from behind. At last, the horrifying android was finally destroyed by the husband and wife working together. At the same time, all the androids throughout the hospital returned to normal operation, but what nobody expected was what happened afterward. While investigating the deaths of the 2 repair technicians, the police restored power to the repair station computers. Without realizing it, they helped the remaining fragments of Alice's data complete a final evolution. Within moments, every police android at the scene suddenly shut down, and Alice's consciousness was preparing for yet another rebirth. After everything that happened, Maggie eventually forgave Nick for his moment of weakness and betrayal, because what truly holds a family together is never a perfect, obedient machine. It's ordinary people willing to admit their mistakes, carry the burden of life, and stay beside the people they love no matter what happens. Technology can make life easier, but it can never replace love or humanity.